Last spring, I watched something that didn't make sense at all. I was standing in a small backyard garden outside Lancaster County, looking at a compost pile that had been turned just a few weeks earlier. It wasn't anything special: kitchen scraps, straw, a bit of manure, nothing you wouldn't expect. But when that pile was spread onto a bed, something happened that stopped me cold. 30 days later, that soil didn't look like compost anymore. It looked like rich, dark, crumbly earth you'd expect after years of conditioning. Soft, alive, almost black. That's it. Meanwhile, I had spent an entire season building my own compost beds, turning them weekly, checking temperatures, doing everything right, and my soil still looked tired by comparison. And when I asked how they did it, they didn't give me some complicated system or expensive formula. They just said, "We don't make compost, we build soil." I'll be honest with you, I didn't believe it at first. I've been around gardening long enough to know that real soil improvement takes time, months, sometimes years. But what I saw in those 30 days forced me to rethink everything I thought I knew about composting. Because this wasn't just faster, it was different. What they were doing wasn't about breaking things down. It was about building a living system from day one. And once you understand that shift, everything changes. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what they do, step by step, and how you can apply it in your own garden, even if you're starting with poor soil right now. And stick around to the end, because I'll show you one simple layering trick I've never seen in any gardening book that activates this process more than anything else I've tried. I'll be honest with you. For over a decade, I was doing composting the way most people are taught. Build a pile, wait months, turn it every couple of weeks, check the temperature if you're serious about it, and hope that by the end of the season you've got something usable. And on paper it worked. I had compost. It looked decent. It smelled earthy enough. I'd spread it across my beds every year thinking I was improving my soil. But when I really paid attention, something wasn't adding up. My plants were still inconsistent. Some grew strong, others struggled. The soil would dry out faster than it should, and every season felt like I was starting from scratch instead of building on progress. It never quite felt like enough. I told myself that's just how gardening is. Soil takes time, years, even decades. That's what all the books say. But looking back now, I can see the real problem. I wasn't building soil. I was just making compost. I was focused on breaking materials down instead of creating a living system. I treated compost like a finished product instead of a process that continues in the ground. And because of that, every time I spread it, the effect was temporary. It fed the soil for a while, but it didn't transform it. And that's the part that took me way too long to figure out. What I saw in that Amish garden wasn't better compost. It was a completely different way of thinking. That shift didn't happen overnight for me. It started the moment I stopped looking at the compost pile and started paying attention to what was happening in the soil itself. I spent a few days around that Amish garden, not asking questions at first, just observing, watching how they handled scraps, manure, bedding, even weeds. Nothing was wasted, but more importantly, nothing was treated as finished. Everything moved directly back into the soil in layers, almost like they were feeding something alive rather than trying to manufacture a product. Instead of waiting months for decomposition to happen in isolation, they built that process directly into the garden beds. Fresh, organic material, partially broken matter, aged manure, all layered intentionally and then covered. And within weeks, the soil itself took over. You could see it. Earthworms everywhere. Moisture held deeper. Texture changing faster than I'd ever seen. That's when it clicked. They weren't composting first and then feeding the soil. They were letting the soil do the composting. And that one difference explains everything. Because once decomposition happens inside an active living soil system instead of outside it, the speed changes, the efficiency changes, even the results change. So here's what this really comes down to. The Amish method isn't about making better compost. It's about turning your soil into a system that builds itself, fast. Instead of waiting months for a pile to break down somewhere off to the side, you're creating conditions where decomposition, nutrient cycling, and soil structure all happen right where your plants are growing. That's how they get that kind of transformation in 30 days. You're not speeding up compost, you're activating the soil. And once that system is working, everything changes. Your soil holds moisture longer, your plants root deeper. Nutrients don't just wash away, they stay available. You stop fighting your garden every season and it starts working with you instead. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how they do it, step by step. We'll start with how they build the base layer that triggers rapid breakdown. The first thing you need to understand is this: everything starts at the ground level, not in a pile somewhere else. They begin by building what I'd call a live base layer directly in the garden bed. This is what triggers the 30-day transformation. Before planting anything, they lay down a thick foundation of organic material right on the soil surface. Not mixed in, not tilled, just layered on top. This base usually includes coarse materials like straw, dried leaves, or old plant stalks, about 3 to 5 inches deep. Now this is important. This layer isn't there to feed plants immediately. It's there to create space. Tiny air pockets that allow moisture, microbes, and organisms to move freely. Think of it as building the structure before adding the nutrients. Once that coarse layer is in place, they lightly wet it, not soaking, just enough to make it damp. Moisture is what wakes up the biology already present in your soil. If you skip this base layer and just dump compost or manure straight onto compacted soil, you slow everything down. The material sits there. It breaks down unevenly. But when you start with this breathable, carbon-rich foundation, earthworms move in almost immediately. Microbes begin colonizing the material from below. Air and moisture balance out naturally. It starts integrating directly into your soil system from day one. I started doing this a few seasons ago, and the difference was obvious within weeks. The soil stayed cooler during heat, held moisture longer after watering, and when I pulled back that top layer, it was already breaking down into dark, rich material. It didn't feel like I was adding compost anymore. It felt like I was building soil from the ground up. Once that base layer is in place, the next step is where most of the acceleration happens, and it's the part almost no one does correctly. Instead of waiting for materials to fully compost, the Amish combine fresh and aged organic matter at the same time, right on top of that base. On top of your coarse layer, you add a mix of nitrogen-rich materials. This can be fresh grass clippings, kitchen scraps, or manure, about 2 to 3 inches. Then, directly over that, you add a thinner layer of something partially broken down, older compost, aged manure, or even soil from a healthy bed. This layering matters more than you think. The fresh materials provide energy. That's what fuels microbial activity. The aged materials act like a starter culture. They introduce active microbes that immediately begin breaking everything down. It starts almost instantly. Then you repeat. Another thin carbon layer, another nitrogen layer, then a light top layer of soil or compost to seal it in. What you're creating is a stacked system where every layer feeds the one below it. Most gardeners compost first, then apply. This method composts in place. Because of that, heat builds gently within the layers. Moisture gets trapped where it's needed. Microbial activity stays concentrated. I've pulled back these layers after just 10 to 14 days and found earthworms working through fresh scraps that should have taken months to break down. That's when you realize what's happening. You're not waiting for compost to form. You're forcing the process to happen faster by stacking the right materials in the right order. And once you see that, it becomes almost impossible to go back to the old way. Let me show you something that changed how I see composting completely. Most of us build a pile off to the side and wait. The Amish approach removes that gap entirely. Instead of isolating organic matter, they integrate it directly into the soil system. No waiting period, no disconnect. Everything happens in one place at the same time. The Amish don't wait for perfection. They work with momentum. You stop managing compost and start managing life inside your soil. Right after you finish layering everything, the Amish add what looks like a simple final step, but it changes how the whole system behaves. They seal the top, not with plastic. They use a thin, tight layer of fine material, usually garden soil, finished compost, or even sifted manure, about ½ inch to 1 inch thick across the entire surface. At first, it doesn't seem like much, but here's what it does. That top layer acts like a moisture lock. It traps humidity inside the layers below, preventing the system from drying out. And when moisture stays consistent, microbial activity stays high. No stop and start breakdown, no slowing down. At the same time, it blocks excess air exposure. That might sound like a bad thing, but it's not. You still have airflow from the base layer underneath. What you're preventing is surface drying, which is what kills momentum in most compost systems. I tried this without the top seal once, and the upper layers had dried out completely. With the seal in place, everything stayed damp, active, and warm beneath the surface. Within 2 to 3 weeks, the layers had already begun collapsing into rich, dark material. It's such a small adjustment, but it makes the difference. If any of this changed the way you think about composting, I'd love to hear about it. Tell me what's been working and where you've been getting stuck. And if you decide to try this method, don't overcomplicate it. Start with one bed, layer it the way we talked about. Give it a few weeks, then come back and look at your soil. Feel it with your hands. That's where you'll see the difference first. If you want more breakdowns like this, real methods, tested over generations, make sure you subscribe. I've got a lot more coming. And remember this, the goal isn't to make perfect compost. It's to build soil that keeps getting better on its own. Once that clicks, you stop chasing results, and you start creating them. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.